Hello everyone, and welcome to another beer review. Now, I've had this beer for quite a while actually, and I've had it since before the summer, but I just didn't think it was the right beer to have over the summer. Just like I don't think it's the right thing to do is to drink kind of Pilsner style beers from the Czech Republic in the middle of winter. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm kind of waiting for a decent time to kind of try this beer because I've been wanting to have this beer, and I thought, well, I'll throw it in with the kind of Christmas series. It's not part of the Christmas series, but I'm going to throw it in kind of alongside the Christmas series because I think it's a more dutiful one. But I'm doing two beer reviews kind of back to back, and I thought, well, I'll do this one first because I've got a funny feeling that the other one might not be particularly nice or such a good beer, and I don't really want to kind of follow bad beer with this beer. I'd rather have it isolated by itself so I can enjoy it, and I don't have anything kind of affecting my enjoyment of it, flavour wise and everything else. So the beer we're doing today is Timothy Taylor Landlord Dark. There you go. Do look freaky when I put my eyebrows up, don't I? Look alright. Oh! He's like, ooh! No. I look kind of deviant, don't I? Like, is that your wife? You know what I mean? It's like that. He's like, no, don't do that, Graham. No, Jesus. So, yes, this is Timothy Taylor Landlord Dark. And, of course, it's rich and smooth and dark. You could make a joke about that, but I won't. And it's 4.1%, 500ml bottle, and I think there's a little bit of spiel on the back there, which is quite nice. So, anyway, Landlord Dark originates from the multi-award-winning Landlord Pale Ale, but brewed with caramelised sugars to give a rich yet light and drinkable dark ale. This perfectly balanced mellow beer has body and depth. It has a fruity toasted aroma with hints of chocolate, citrus and roasted malts on the tongue. A darker shade of pale. Really? Really? Yeah, you had to go that way, did you? Come on now. Come on, TT. No, don't go down all these kind of... No. Taylor's taste is achieved by using, oh, here we go, the finest natural ingredients, there, but they put on that type of stuff. But anyway, the malt is golden. Let's just see. Malt is golden promise. Hops is Fuggles, Styrian, Goldings, and Goldings, and all for that taste of Taylor. So there we go. And of course, it contains malted barley and hickory beeps and bops. There we go. So yes, I'll be kind of looking forward to this beer. So let's crack it open and see what we've got. Oh, yeah, bandit, yeah. Oh, lovely. Let's get it poured. Yes, at least said about their, a darker shade of pale. I can see where they're going with it. They probably thought, oh, it's very articulate, isn't it? Yeah, no, let's not. Let's put all our energies into the beer and not so much to the marketing and the bump. Come on, you bugger. Come on, pour. Some nice colours going on there. A nice kind of tanned head there for people in the podcast. I would probably say it's about a 1 finger head. I'm getting about 1.5 finger head because, I don't know, some fucker must have shaken the bottle. Slightly ice cream coney at the top, wee bit of a dome. But yes, it's very dark and a kind of tanned coloured head. So it is. But yeah, it looks quite nice. I do like dark beers in the winter. Other people like dark beers any time of the year. It just depends. It also depends what the kind of body is and everything else. I mean, I don't mind dark beers in the summer and things like that, but if it's lighter of body and things like this. But yeah, what does it smell of? Is it me? Because I'm getting absolutely nothing, really. Oh, a little light hint of malt. Bloody hell, seriously, you got a beer this dark and that type of stuff, and you hardly get any aroma off it. You just kind of, what's going on here? But yeah, Light malt, very light malt. I don't know what's going on with my eye just now. Oh, I've got a finger in it. Anyway. Yeah, just getting malt. Maybe a hint of grain. Maybe a little hint of licorice, maybe. I'm not sure. It really is. It's very light aromas in general, really. You're struggling to try and kind of identify. So yeah. But let's see what it tastes like. It's all about the taste. Well, there's a lot of flavours there that are bang on the standard pale ale Landlord. There is. No question. And you taste it, and you, even if you didn't know what it was, you think, Jesus, that's got taste of Timothy Taylor about it. You know, these kind of, like I've said before, certain breweries, when they have got very kind of iconic and popular beers, they start to kind of have these kind of identifiable flavours within their beers because of that. Because they don't really kind of stray too far from the nest. You know, they know they've got a good successful beer, so they don't really want to kind of go, well, sometimes they do go completely at the opposite end of the scale, and yeah, you're thinking, bloody hell, they've really kind of tested new waters with that one. But other times, you know, you kind of taste the beer, you're thinking, well, yeah, they haven't really strayed too far away from their kind of a successful recipe. And they have these kind of what we call, it's almost like a kind of character flavours in some of the beers, you know. And this is like this. I mean, looking at it, if you put them two side to side, you think, well, they're going to be two different beers. But surprisingly, how much of the actual Timothy Taylor flavours are actually in this. There's actually quite a lot. You get a bit more of a roasted bitter finish. And you are getting that kind of little hints of roasted malts. And you are getting a slightly different bitterness to it. But overall, it's actually quite a nice beer. It really is. Well, of course. Any type of beer that's going to emulate Timothy Taylor is going to be a nice beer. Whether it's a really good beer is a different story, but you expect to get a decent standard with certain kind of flavour profiles, which you are getting. But you are getting a slightly kind of, I'm not going to say coffee or chocolate tones, but you are getting slightly kind of similar kind of to these type of tones in the bitterness. But I'm not saying it is chocolatey or coffee or things like that, because they're not so pronounced, but you are getting a slight kind of accent with that kind of bitterness that is giving you a different edge to the bitterness than you would get from the pale ale. Because obviously with the pale ale, you're getting a bit of the bitterness coming from obviously the hops, whereas this one you're getting a bit of the bitterness coming from the roasted malts and not necessarily all from the hops. So that's the kind of thing that's kind of standing out with me on this one. But overall, it's actually quite nice. So it is. What does stand out is I've had a few stouts and porters, and I've got another porter coming up here. But I've got a few kind of stouts and porters that I've had kind of recently, and then, you know, within the last kind of 6 to 12 months, and the majority of them have been bloody disappointing and just lacking in flavour, body, everything else. And I think that's one of the things that you get that we've been discussing with other viewers. And yeah, there's a lot of bad porters and a lot of bad stouts out there that I don't think that a lot of breweries just don't treat them with the respect they deserve. And some of the crazy shitty flavours they're putting into porters and everything else, thinking that's acceptable. But even with the stouts have been very, very disappointing. And I think sometimes you have to look to a different kind of dark beer range, because right now the breweries are actually spoiling. You know, they're spoiling stouts and porters, and it's quite difficult to get a decent one. Especially if you're doing reviews, because yes, there is ones you can identify that are quite good and decent, but I can't keep reviewing them every bloody day of the week. You know, I'm going to try different ones because people want me to try different ones. I want to try different ones. But the problem is, once you kind of get away from the kind of the main kind of decent ones, you start to realise there's a lot of mediocre piss out there. And that's where you start to kind of look at maybe milds or other darker beers, like something like this. There is a point to my ramblings, that sometimes if you want better kind of dark beer flavours, that you have to kind of, to a certain degree, avoid stouts and porters and move on to kind of more darker ales, milds and things like that to get your kind of flavour hits. Because a lot of times you're just not getting them in the stouts and the porters. And that's the point here, is this isn't a stout or a porter, but this has little kind of flavour tones there that associate with more of a kind of a porter. But they work well with other flavour profiles that are associated with the kind of famous pale ale. And that's what I'm trying to say, is a case of, it's a kind of amalgamation of, we've tweaked it, we've added some other little kind of flavour accents that does make it identifiable more as a dark beer, but we still get some of the accent flavours of the kind of pale ale. And surprisingly enough, it works, but it's not trying to be a porter, it's not trying to be a stout, it's being a kind of more of a dark ale. So you can get away with that. And I think that's one of the big problems, is that a lot of breweries are maybe kind of misnaming some of the beers. Maybe you should take them as more of a kind of a dark ale rather than a porter or a stout, but they go for the porter or the stout because people can identify with that and they think they're going to get better sales or something. But let's be honest, what is Landlord actually even calling this? They're just calling it a dark ale, and that's it. And that's what I would associate it with, a dark ale, but with some nice kind of flavour characteristics that I recognise quite easily, but some other nice little kind of twist to it. And I think that's probably the best way to describe it. Imagine it as Timothy the Landlord Pale Ale, kind of flavour, kind of base flavours, but with little other little different accents that just make it kind of different. And yeah, it is. And I mean, it has the bitterness, but it's a different style of bitterness and things like that. And the little kind of additional flavours and the little tweaks, it's enough to kind of make it a kind of almost a beer in its own right, even though it's a kind of a darker version. And yeah, it's nice. I like it. It's not actually what I thought it would be. I'll be totally honest. I thought it'd be slightly sweeter. And I don't know, but I just had that impression it would be slightly sweeter than it is. And I'm glad that it isn't. I was more prepared for something being a little bit more sweeter. Maybe a little bit with the more kind of roasted malts and all that. Maybe I get a bit more kind of heavy caramelisation and everything else. And just going by how it read, because they did read it as basically brewed with caramelised sugars and everything else. And I think, maybe you're going to get a bit more of that kind of caramel, kind of more toffee kind of flavours. But it isn't. It's a little bit more edge to the bitterness. And yeah, I wouldn't say it's sweet in any kind of shape or form. It's not overly bitter, but there is a good amount of bitterness at the end, but there's not too much silly sweetness going on in the kind of start of the mouth and mid tongue, and just, yeah, it's quite controlled. And overall, very drinkable, very nice, very sessionable. And I like it because it still has the accent flavours of the pale ale, because let's be totally honest, the pale ale is a nice beer. Let's be totally honest, it's a nice beer, and it's nice to have some of them accents. But it's also nice to have Um, it's also nice to have the little different flavours coming through. That does make it different. But again, it's controlled. It's not just let's chuck anything old in. I feel that they've probably done a few different versions of this until they got here. And I'm glad that they did. Instead of just, going with the first one they tried and think, oh, well, yeah, that's good enough. I think it's the cases of they respect their brand and their kind of reputation a lot more. And they've kind of thought about this, tried maybe a few until they feel that, well, yeah, this is probably more like that what we actually want to achieve, and probably more like the kind of Timothy Taylor name and everything else. And yeah, let's break down the flavours. Start off, you're getting some nice malt tones, but you're not getting that malty sweetness. You're getting slightly kind of malty, slightly kind of caramelized toffiness, but not so much of the sweetness. You get a bit of sweetness at the front of the mouth, but really not much. To the point is that some of them toffee flavours are almost bordering on slightly molasses-esque. That kind of slightly bitter edge to the sweetness. You just get the sweetness, but just as it slightly kind of dies down a bit, you just get the little kind of bitter tones. And you've got the greens as well. You've got the barley there, and overall, that's the first thing that kind of stood out to me there, is that I expected it to be sweeter going by the description, and I'm glad it's not, because it is giving me more of that kind of robust dark ale flavours at the start. And then you move on to the kind of mid-tongue, and this is where it gets, is you start getting a little bit more of the kind of slightly roasted bitterness coming through there, just getting coming through as accents. But the sweetness and the malt level and the kind of caramelised flavours and toffee flavours are just kind of still there. And yeah, you're maybe getting slightly a little bit of hops coming through there. You're starting to get them kind of hop flavours coming through from the kind of pale ale. And then you start getting these kind of slight accents coming through. And yeah, it's quite a strong mid-tongue because of that, because you've got accent flavours from the pale ale sitting there in the mid-tongue. We've also got this kind of slightly kind of roasted bitterness accents just starting to come through as well as having that kind of slightly kind of dampened down sweetness and the kind of malty kind of roasted malt flavours as well. And yeah, but it's controlled enough that it's not too busy. But yeah, it is that kind of yin and yang. Is like pale ale and then not pale ale. And that's what you're kind of getting. And then it moves on to the kind of aftertaste. And with the aftertaste, you are starting to get a little bit more of the bitterness coming through. As it moves on there, you can still get a little bit of the malt. You still get a little bit of the hops is there. The hops are still there in the aftertaste. And they are providing that little bit of kind of pale ale bitterness that you'd expect from the pale ale Landlord. But you're also getting that kind of roasted bitterness coming through as well over the top of it. And that's the kind of the lasting flavour you're getting as everything kind of dissipates. The last thing to dissipate is the kind of slightly roasted flavours. And overall, it's quite controlled, it's quite nice, very sessionable, but not trying too hard. It's not trying to kind of outdo its kind of paler brother. It's kind of working alongside it. It can accept some of the flavour accents and characteristics of the pale ale, but not trying to kind of outdo it with the kind of more darker kind of roasted flavours. They've kind of, I would say they've kind of maybe held back a bit, which is a good thing. Less is more, as I keep saying. And yeah, Overall, I actually quite like this. I do. It's not what I expected, though. I'll be totally honest. I was expecting something lighter and sweeter, and I'll be totally honest. If I'd got that, I'd probably be a bit disappointed. I expected to have kind of the pale ale, kind of more hoppy bitterness, but the malts, the darker malts, the roasted malts, give me a little bit more of a kind of caramelized sweetness, and it's not gone that way. And I'm glad. I really am. I think it's a better beer for that. But overall, it's nicely balanced. It's typical Timothy Taylor. You can taste the quality of the ingredients. You can see the balance and the control. You know, each step seems to kind of work with the previous one and the one that's coming. And yeah, overall, it's a nice beer. And it's one of the ones I'm now thinking, bugger, I've only got one bottle. I need to start kind of believing in myself sometimes. You think, well, but yeah, although in saying that, looking at the shelves, I've got a hell of a amount of bloody beer. Quite a lot of this I'm going to have to probably transport up to Scotland for doing beer reviews, and I've got to think about what ones I'm going to transfer and everything else. So it's a bit of a pain in the arse, to be totally honest. So I can't just keep on buying beers. It's just ridiculous. I've got beers everywhere. But anyway, what would I give this out of 10? There's the question. That's what probably we're here. We're going to get a 10, boy. Come on. Tell us. So are you havering? Ah, okay. Right. With all the disappointments I've had with stouts and porters over the last 6 to 12 months, and I think that's going to continue. Looking at the bottle I'm looking at now, I'm going to be reviewing next. Anyway, looking at them and how kind of disappointing a lot of them are, gutless and flavourless and just stupid other flavours added to them, you think, Jesus. It's nice to get a beer. Okay, it doesn't really have the body or the velvet feel of a stout or things like that, so it has more slightly acting flavours of a porter, but not the kind of defined flavours of a porter, so you're not getting kind of chocolatey or coffee tones or any of that kind of stuff. But you're getting a little homage to it in a kind of light way. But overall, there's more enjoyable flavours in this beer than I've had in quite a lot of the stouts and porters over the last 12 months. And like I'm saying, is sometimes if you're wanting that kind of more kind of controlled and more traditional flavours, maybe it's better to look at milds and dark ales rather than going for the stouts and porters, because a lot of them are branded stouts and porters, and they're anything but, let's be totally honest. In fact, they're even a poor dark ale and things like that, never mind a stout or porter. So yeah, that's the thing that kind of stands out to me, that I'm getting more enjoyment and better flavours from this beer than I have been getting from stouts and porters. Which again, alarm bells should be ringing, because really you should be getting a lot more flavour from these ones. But also you get that little bit of hoppiness there, and I think that works as well, which of course you couldn't really have the hoppiness in a stout because it just wouldn't work. And if you had the same level of hoppiness in a porter, I think it'd be too much as well. So on that basis, what would I give it out of 10? It's drinkable, it's sessionable, some really nice flavour tones. They work together. I like the little kind of accent flavours that hint to the pale ale. So I'm going to give this an easy 7.5 out of 10 for a dark ale. 7.5 out of 10. Getting closer to an 8. It's not really that far away from an 8. But it's one of these ones, because it's sessionable, I think probably if I had 2 or 3 of them, then I could probably give it an 8, probably quite easily. But just because I'm sitting there drinking well, less than a bottle, then yeah, I think 7.5 is a good easy and safe score to give it. And yeah, I like it. I would definitely recommend it. If you like your dark beers, then look at this as an option instead of some of these kind of crappy stouts and porters that are basically going about. And also look at some of the milds as well, because I think you're going to get far better service and better bang for your buck going for the likes of these beers and milds than you are going for the porters and the stouts right now, because like I said, there's a lot of crap out there. It really is. So yes, it's 4.1%, very sessionable, 500ml bottle. I'll put down below the pricing because I really can't remember because I'm old and stupid, and I bought it so long ago that it's probably out of date. No, it probably isn't actually. Oh, January 24th. Yes. A month. Anyway. But yeah, 7.5 out of 10, 4.1%, 500ml bottle. Thanks for watching. Cheers. And bye for now.